Keep, sell, unsure on the Chelsea squad currently. The first team squad that Mauricio Pochettino has at his disposal, and basically giving you my thoughts on their long-term futures at Stamford Bridge. There's a lot of discussion at the moment in terms of Chelsea's direction under the current ownership. How many of these players are actually good enough to be at Stamford Bridge, and will they be here for the long term? So I'm breaking them down into 3 categories, giving you the players that I'm pretty sure and probably should be here for the long term, those that I would be selling pretty soon. Not all of those kind of like just out of, my own choice, but I think also a bit of reality over their current situations. And then, of course, there are a few within there that I could kind of see going either way. So let's get into it. And please do in the comments give me your lists and your thoughts as ever. So let's start with keep. Let's be positive first. And actually, this is the biggest list. And I think that's actually quite a good sign that I actually want to keep a large portion of the players currently in the first team squad. Because I actually do think there's real talent there. And I'm obviously including some of those players who are currently injured, just returning from injury. Reece James, yes, he has injury problems, but the talent's there. Chelsea have committed to him with a long-term contract. I really do hope, whether he has surgery or not, he can get past these injuries, because we know if Reece is able to play regularly, which is the big deal breaker, obviously, he's an extraordinary talent. There's no doubt about that. There can be no denial about that. He is a massive, massive player for Chelsea if he remains fit. Malo Gusto, I think, will prove to be a shrewd signing just as a competent backup. I've consistently said that, and I think it's worth keeping him. Just for that reason of James's, injury issues and being able to rotate. And as well, I think he's had some good performances, especially moving forward. Benoit Badiashile looks like a really good get from Monaco. I thought he had a really good performance against Sheffield United. I think as a player, as a defender, I think he adapted so quickly mid-season, given how difficult it was for others to adapt to Chelsea life, how bad last season was. I think he was one of the rare, very few moments of light within Chelsea season to watch Badiashile. I really like him as a defender. Levi Colwill too. Again, we fought so hard to keep him. We've handed him a new contract. I guess the big thing is, can he stop playing at left back and play and compete for the role he really is meant for, which is as a left-sided centre-back? And obviously he'd be competing with Benoit Badiashile. Wesley Fofana, a bit like Reece James, has suffered some really big injury issues, but we got to keep him. I think he's a really, really good defender. And I feel like in the long term, he will prove to be one of Chelsea's most important players. There's going to be a real battle on there, but it's good to have quality in depth. And I think whether we move to a 3 at the back at some point, there's obviously more opportunities around there. But despite his injury problems, Wesley Fofana is someone that I think has got years left in him. And I really like him as a defender. Ben Chilwell, I think, if you're keeping Reece James, I think you're keeping Ben Chilwell. If, basically the same logic. If both of these players have committed their futures to Chelsea, and the hope will be they can get past these injury problems, because I think both, especially Chilwell, I'm a big fan of Chilwell, probably one of my favourite players in the current squad. I think just the way he's kind of been able to break sort of perceptions of him, and already, has contributed some brilliant moments. I think as a goal threat, he's massive for Chelsea, which is a massive miss at the moment, and his ability to make those diagonal runs, I just love seeing. So hopefully when he returns in the new year, he'll be a big player for Chelsea in the second half of this season. Enzo Fernandez, a massive investment. You have to back that investment. And I really do think, despite some concerns about him maybe not impacting the games I want him to, or maybe some concerns that people have over where he's being played currently, Enzo Fernandez is undeniable talent. He's quality. The ball sticks to his feet. And I really do think from a goal scoring point of view, I think he could get better in that aspect. But also from a creative point of view, I want him to be that kind of thread the needle pass, and I think he really can develop into that player and just maybe taking the games by the scruff of the neck a little bit more. And I feel Enzo has got that within him, so hopefully we can unleash that potential. But there's no point cutting ties so early with him, and who would buy him off Chelsea for the price we got him for originally. Moise Caicedo is the same deal. We spent all summer trying to sign him for a massive fee. We beat out Liverpool for him, so Moise Caicedo, I think, is adapting actually to life at Chelsea now, and I think will be a long-term stay of our midfield. Conor Gallagher, absolute crime if Chelsea sell Conor Gallagher in January. So in terms of, if we're looking at the big picture, can I 100% say that Conor Gallagher will be here in 5 years' time? It's hard to say with this current ownership. I could see them selling him in January, but it'd be absolute nonsense because he has been so crucial and vital to Chelsea this season. And he continues to play for a reason, because tactically, he's superb. I think in terms of his ability to connect play between basically all phases of the pitch, I think is important. And he has created chances for Chelsea as well. I think he's improved on that aspect. So for me, Gallagher has to be staying. Romeo Lavia, I've seen nothing of him in a Chelsea shirt, so to make a judgment on him would be unfair. So he's going to be here for the long term. Christopher Nkunku, I think, will be a game changer for Chelsea. I really do. I really hope this is the one that kind of cracks the code, or at least from an attacking point of view, a little bit like Palmer, really justifies his price, basically. And we look at him as like, yeah, that was a key signing. He's going to be one of the best attackers in the Premier League. We haven't been able to say that for many players in recent years, and I hope Nkunku can be that. Cole Palmer, despite it coming very late in the window, is already proving to be such a shrewd piece of business by Chelsea, which is not something you can say for this ownership very often. But I think people need to give them credit for this, because Palmer, I was sceptical about signing him given the lack of Premier League minutes he had, and having to adapt to a different environment from Man City, where you don't have the comfort blanket of, well, you're going to win a lot of titles each season and you're actually not relied upon to be a big player. He has taken that responsibility on his shoulders so well. He already is one of Chelsea's best, most important players, and he's scoring goals. He's putting up the numbers already that show that he's a very talented player. So I think brilliant signing. Carney Chukwuemeka is another one. I think it's such a shame his injury problems, and this is a consistent theme across the Chelsea squad. But Chukwuemeka is someone that I feel will get more time under Mauricio Pochettino, and actually as an advanced player looks to be someone that Pochettino can mould into an even more effective player. So we saw it in pre-season and right at the start of this year. I'd like to see a lot more of Chukwuemeka in a Chelsea shirt. Nicholas Jackson. I know some people just want to discard Jackson, but you cannot deny the numbers so far this season. At the time of recording this, 7 Premier League goals for Nicholas Jackson in a Chelsea shirt. Given the lack of football he's had, he hasn't had tons of senior football, no Premier League football before he arrived at Chelsea. And the expectation level wasn't high. I don't think anyone expected him to come in and be 30 goals a season. He's raw. We always knew that, like with a lot of players. When you invest in young players, you've got to understand they are raw. They aren't the finished product, but you have to give them the time to develop. And also a lot of pressure on the shoulders of a Chelsea number 9. But the numbers themselves show a player who is contributing. And when you compare that to players of recent years who cost a lot more with a lot more expectation and hype around them, I think that's still impressive and worth persisting with in the long term. Now we're going to go to the players that need to be sold. And I don't think this list is going to be that surprising to you, really. I'd be amazed if any of you are turning around and going, yeah, this is a shock. Robert Sanchez, I don't see him as a player that should be here for the long term. He really did feel like a short term kind of signing just to kind of buy someone, because Kepa went to Real Madrid. I don't think Sanchez is worse than Kepa, but he has made some key mistakes, and he, in terms of his passing out from the back, it has proven to be really hurtful to Chelsea in some situations. And I just don't see him as that commanding figure that is going to take this role by the scruff of the neck and be here for the long term. I think Chelsea next summer will have to invest heavily again, or maybe even in January if an opportunity becomes available for someone. Thiago Silva, this is not like a sell because you're awful. It's a sell because, given his age, we'll give him a fond farewell. One of Chelsea's greatest free transfers. I mean, what an amazing signing he has been for Chelsea Football Club. Involved in the Champions League win, has defied his age basically, and expectation and levels to be able to prove himself. And I think the biggest regret for most Chelsea fans is that we didn't buy him sooner. Like, we didn't get him younger. Him and JT in a defence, what a dream partnership that could have been. But for his Chelsea era, I think he's been wonderful. So it's not going with any sort of bitterness. It's just understanding that I feel like now, especially next year, it needs to be a progression to the younger centre-backs we've invested in. Marco Correa has had a little bit of resurgency under Pochettino, but I still think is a flawed player. And I think in the long term will be that for Chelsea. And I just don't see it getting much better. So I think he'd need to part ways as well. And he nearly did go out on loan in the summer as well. Ian Maatsen, I really like Ian Maatsen, but he's barely getting any game time under Mauricio Pochettino, and I could see him moving in January. And it's the same for Trevor Chalobah. I really like him as a player. I think the way people have spoken about Chalobah is so disrespectful. I think the way people have forgotten context and also the value that he has offered when he has played, I think it's a real shame. But I think Chalobah, like others, like Fikayo Tomori, another young Chelsea defender that moved on. I think he'll go somewhere and very quickly prove to be a brilliant defender. And I wouldn't be surprised, given Chelsea's transfer woes, that in 2 to 3 years we're regretting letting him go. But I just can't see him staying any longer. So now we're going to move on to the unsure. Petrovic, still young. Has barely played any games for Chelsea. Played his first Premier League game against Sheffield United. Kept a clean sheet. It's kind of hard to judge him at the moment, and it's hard to know with that goalkeeping situation how it will look in 2 to 3 years' time, whether Petrovic will still be here, whether he'll be out on loan. I mean, I just, that's why I've put him in this list. It's not to say, let's just sell him. I haven't seen enough to make a judgment on him, and he's still young, so we'll see how that develops. Axel Disasi, I'm unsure on. Again, I don't think he's been a bad buy. I was a little bit skeptical of the signing originally. You can go back and watch the original reaction. I just didn't see, if in my opinion, I'd keep Chalobah over Disasi. I would. But we've invested in Disasi. I don't think he's going to be sold like next summer, but I'm not entirely sure he's going to be over the long term. Again, given this ownership, given how I think they'll look to make profit on players, is he just going to be a backup player? He may prove me wrong. He's played a lot more football than I suspected so far this season, but a lot of that has been because of injuries to others, and maybe that's what will sustain his Premier League and Chelsea career, but I'm not entirely sure he's going to be here in say 5 years time. I think it's the same for Leslie Ugochukwu. I've been actually quite impressed and pleasantly surprised by Ugochukwu, another inexperienced player. I think he's been asked a lot to play for Chelsea in some, I think, feisty and hostile occasions, and I think he's handled himself well. But I think with Leslie, I could see a loan. I could see a situation where maybe just Lavia, Gallagher, Caicedo, Enzo, Chukwuemeka, I think there'll be options that are more favourable to coaches for a variety of reasons, and then he eventually gets loaned out somewhere and we don't see him again. That doesn't mean he's not a good player. That doesn't mean he couldn't offer something to Chelsea. I'm unsure. Mudryk is the same. And I know some people will be really angry that I've put Mudryk on this list, but Mudryk is just such an unpredictable talent. From what I've seen of him, I think he probably needs a loan, but he probably isn't going to get a loan because of the politics of it all, because Chelsea have bought him for a large fee. There's a large expectation, and I just don't think he'd be sent out on loan anytime soon. I think the problem is he's so raw and green, and I think we have thrown a player with barely any football who just needs seasoning, needs reps to get better, and the only way he's going to get better with those reps, but maybe at a level where he isn't expected to be the big star player. But unfortunately at Chelsea, that pressure and spotlight is on him. So I'm not sure where it could go, because you watch him sometimes and he does brilliant things. He's got attributes that make him devastating in the modern game. That's why so many clubs were interested in him. That's why Chelsea and Arsenal were interested in him, and why he moved. And we've seen glimpses of it, but I'm not entirely sure. I can't sit here and say for certain that those raw parts of his game are going to be sort of honed in to a point where he's going to be world class and really amazing, that looks like that time and investment was worth it. And we know at Chelsea how short-term things can be. We know how demanding everything is in the elite environment, and whether that actually is going to help and be beneficial to a player like Mudryk, who does need that time. So that's why I'm unsure. He could stay here, develop into something brilliant, which people hope he does, or I think he could be lost in the shuffle and eventually, as I say, departed from Stamford Bridge. Madueke, I don't know why we bought Madueke. It's another one of those things of Chelsea just thinking about the next 6 months. You've invested in a young talent and he's already lost at Chelsea. And maybe that's because of Mauricio Pochettino, who he has previous with. I just think it's a sign of Chelsea's sort of stockpiling players without an idea of how those players are going to thrive in an environment. I think Madueke is a very good talent. I'd be sad to see him not do well at Chelsea, because I think at the time he has had opportunities. He's really impressed me as a wide player. But he just looks like a player that will eventually depart because he'll just get lost in the shuffle. Armando Broja is the same. I really like Broja. I think as a player, he's got attributes that I just love as a forward. I guess at the moment you could sort of sit there and go, well, he's got as much of a chance as Nicholas Jackson of thriving at Chelsea, and I think that's a fair point. The reason I'm unsure is, when Nkunku returns and Chelsea's probably... I think it's realistic to expect Chelsea to sign a striker in the next year, a big striker, and that's going to impact Jackson, but I think it will impact Broja. Broja has more Premier League experience than Jackson, and I think Broja has been on the verge of leaving Chelsea before, and I think there will be a Premier League club that would probably take him on a permanent and give him a starting role. So I could see that happening. And because of this ownership looking at FFP with homegrown players, I could see Breuer departing. Again, is that a good choice or not? I'm not entirely sure, and I wouldn't be happy seeing Breuer go because I think he's got a lot of potential to get better. But I do think there'll just be a breaking point with Chelsea investing on new players who need minutes, potentially keeping Jackson, him not getting a lot of minutes, and actually seeing that the grass is greener elsewhere. So those are my thoughts. I didn't include some loan players because some of their futures are uncertain. The likes of Kendry Pires is years down the line from returning to Chelsea. So it's just some of those players I really am uncertain about. So it was only ones currently in the first team, either injured or not, that I could speak about. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and also hit that subscribe button. It's free to do regular Chelsea content on this channel heading into 2024. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me across the socials at SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.